The success of the radio ballads established MacColl as the leading figure in the rapidly expanding folk movement. Every town in Britain had its folk club, and MacColl and Seeger toured constantly. The Ballads and Blues Club in London had reorganized under the name of the Singers Club, with MacColl and Seeger as resident performers. It attracted young singers like John Faulkner, who worked with MacColl for nearly 10 years.
Down in the dirt and darkness I was born, go down. Out of the hard black cold face I was torn, go down. Kicked on the world and the earth split open, crawled through a crack where the rock was broken, burrowed a hole away in the cold, go down. In a cradle of coal in the darkness I was laid, go down. Down in the dirt and darkness I was raised, go down. Cut me teeth on a 5-foot timber, held up the roof with me little finger, started me time away in the mine, go down. That I was born, I was 6 foot tall, go down. The very next day I learned the way to haul, go down. On the third day worked at board and pillar, I worked on the fourth as a long wall filler, getting my steam up, hewing the seam, go down.
I felt myself that folk song was a political issue. It's not just about sitting around singing songs about fox hunting in pubs. It's much more than that. And as social documents, the folk songs are not just there on pieces of paper to be looked at in museums, but should actually be performed and brought to people's attention.
MacColl used the Singers Club as a platform for his ideas.
It was very much controlled by Ewan, who did most of the introductions and introduced people, and it was a very educational kind of sort of setup. You know, it was more like an illustrated lecture, really, rather than a gig. You know, that was, and everybody was, all the kids. When I say kids, most people that were fairly young that went there were very much in awe of this man sitting with the back to front chair, pouring out these words of wisdom, and then singing songs to illustrate it. It was very exciting. I mean, it was very good.
In the United States, there was a folk boom developing on parallel lines. Performers like Rambling Jack Elliott and Simon and Garfunkel spent time in London. So too did the rising star of the Greenwich Village set, Bob Dylan. The Singers Club was likely to be their first port of call.
He was just breaking it at the time. But the word did go out, and there were a lot of people there, and it was packed and very steamy, smoky atmosphere, and everything clicked, and you went down a storm. Everybody was very impressed. And they knew that they were listening to something new. This wasn't somebody singing Woody Guthrie songs. It was somebody who was making their own statement. A bit later on, when people like Dylan and Joan Baez emerged as stars, the attitude of the British sort of like folkies changed dramatically. They were no longer acceptable, and they became people that you'd be basically just, you didn't buy their records.
Who were equally concerned about the direction folk music was taking. They called themselves the Critics Group.
On a typical evening when it was at its height, you'd have about 10 to 20 people there, and he'd be sending people off in pairs to different corners of the house with a subject for a song, an approach to the song, and he'd say, come back with a song about this. People would come back with their songs, very quickly written, and each one would be sung and they'd be discussed, why they worked, why they didn't work, how it could be done better, from all angles, from the metre that it was written in, the tune, the poetry, and whether the song put across what it was intended to.
And what age were you when all this was going on?
I'm not really sure. I must have been... That would have been from 8 or 9 onwards, until the age of about 13 or 14, I suppose.
The critics group thing was exciting because, you know, of an evening, they'd all be doing these very odd things, which is you'd walk into a room and there'd be a group of people writing a song, and their brief was to write a song in 20 minutes about this subject, or walk into another room and there'd be people doing voice exercises. I sort of, for a bit, thought all families must be like that, but it was very odd.
And we were noticing that a lot of songs were being changed because people didn't know how to perform them. So in a way, it was a how to perform group that used a lot of acting techniques, a lot of intellectual talk, and a lot of observation of what folk musicians did do. So if we were worrying about how to accompany a song, say, we would look at what folk accompanists did on similar types of songs in contiguous cultures. We'd say, they do this, they don't do this, they do this, they don't do this, therefore let's pick up the concertina and let's try applying this, not applying that idea, which, let's throw that one out, using this and this. And we worked out a number of ways of applying principles without necessarily applying specific harmonies, taking specific melodies, but just taking the ideas.
You have to really be committed to an idea if you're going to move people, if you're going to create for people an unforgettable experience. The experience almost of an evolutionary jump, so that you suddenly remember the time when you first started thinking. I think it's, without that, I can't really see why actors stay in the theatre, why painters paint, why sculptors sculpt. I can't really think what the reason is if there is not that kind of dedication, not that kind of identification with the medium.
We all knew that he was a very difficult person to, not difficult in the sense of being temperamental. He wasn't temperamental. He was just very strict. He was like a bit kind of schoolmaster-ish in the sense of he wanted things done his way, and he had a kind of a military fashion about doing things. And being in the critics group was a bit like that in the sense of we're going in a direction. You know, we have a kind of a mission to fulfill. And people, of course, were young enough to think in those terms. People that really.
His gear as he done before, and bids adieu to his native shore. For he loved